Hey everyone, Karen the Warp Spinster here. Thanks for spending some time with me today. This is our first day of the weekly design challenge. I don't know how many weeks it's going to be yet. I have prompts for 6 weeks, so we'll see if we go any further than that. I'm sure I can come up with a lot more prompts than that, and you may have some to suggest too, please do. I wanted to start out showing you just a few of the quilts that I actually made from a design challenge that I did a couple of years ago on my blog. I will see if I can find that blog, which hasn't been really up and running for a while now, but I will see if I can find a link to that so you can see the design challenge. But I wanted to start out showing you some of the quilts. I have not made quilts out of all of the things that I designed. I may never make some of them. I may make more than one from the same challenge. So this one is called Unhinged, and it was a challenge to design a quilt based on an architectural feature. And this was based on a beautiful hinge, it's a piece of art, in my hairdresser shop. I'd walked by that door, through that door for years, and one day I suddenly noticed this really gorgeous hinge. So I started out calling it Elemental, but I thought Unhinged was probably a lot better. I showed this to my hairdresser. She's more of a Victorian quilt kind of person, and I showed it to her. And she said, "Oh, that's interesting." So maybe Unhinged is sort of what she thought about my quilt design. She was very polite. She's a very sweet lady. Then I also, so that's one. This is a fairly symmetrical, straightforward quilt, and it has a good resemblance to the hinge itself. So it's abstract, but not as abstract as things could go. There was also a challenge. Someone challenged me to make a quilt based on the challenge. I've renamed it, so I have to think about this. Different Pathways. And I'll post some photos of other designs that I made, and I'll talk about those later. But this is, it's sort of abstract, but it's more representational. And I've called it Between Two Rivers. Where I live, the boundaries are defined by two rivers. The rivers actually run north and south. These are running east and west, but it's quilter's license or artist license or something. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, although it's the quilting that I think really made a difference to me here, and that's not really what we're talking about, but it represents fertile fields. So we've got the green with the fields, and the quilting is the plow lines, and there are waves in the water of the river, et cetera, et cetera. So that one's a little more representational, but still abstract and still pretty good size. This one is called Feynman Lives, and it was a challenge my brother put to me to design a quilt based on Feynman diagrams. Richard Feynman was a very popular, well-known, and much-loved physicist, and he came up with, I don't know how to say this because I'm not a physicist, my best understanding of a Feynman diagram, and I'll put an example of one above the video here, is it's a diagram about how subatomic particles move. That is the depth and breadth of my understanding of Feynman diagrams. But there are straight lines, and there are arrows, and there are wave lines. And originally, I was looking up some Feynman diagrams, and some of them had colors on it. And I read that the colors, different colors represented different particles. So muons and gluons and all of that. I have since been told that that's really not true in a true Feynman diagram. So again, artist license from a non-physicist person. Anyway, so this one I have not quilted yet because I keep saying I'm going to design fabric for the back that has some Feynman diagrams on it, and I haven't done that yet. And I think they'll just be wavy lines. So these are representing the arrows and the wavy lines. It's a smaller quilt. You think I'd have finished it by now, wouldn't you? And that's just another example. So there are a couple of things I want to say about the challenges before we get started. One is that this is not a design challenge where you have to meet certain parameters, that you have to be able to see the concept or the prompt within your final quilt. Your final design does not have to look anything at all in the end what the prompt started. The prompts are just to get you started, to give you something to start from, and then you can do whatever you want with it. The goal is to design a quilt that you like, not to meet certain parameters. So this is different from some design challenges where you really have to meet some of those criteria. Not here. We're just having fun designing a quilt. The other thing is, we're just designing the quilt. You don't have to make the quilt. Absolutely make the quilt if you want to. I hope you design something that you like well enough that you want to quilt it, but that's not part of the challenge because it's every week, and I don't know about you, but I'm not making another quilt every week. Some of them I probably will make, and they may be different sizes. I've been making pretty decent sized quilts, and I'm running out of room for them. I swap them out a lot in my house, but the spare bed is getting kind of overloaded and the closets are full of quilts, and got to do something about that. But I do have spots in my house where I want to hang smaller quilts. Excuse me. But I do have places in my house where I need to hang smaller quilts. So I think when I'm designing these quilts, I'm probably going to do them on a smaller scale than this. This is not a huge bed quilt kind of thing, but for hanging on a wall, it's really larger than I need right now. So the basic rule is, this is all to just get you started to design a quilt, and it doesn't matter whether or not I think it fits the prompt or anybody else thinks it fits the prompt. It's just you having fun designing a quilt. So with that in mind, let's get started on some more specific details and how I go about doing it, which may help you, may not. You may go your own way. Any way is fine, but I want to sort of give you an option for how you might think about designing quilts from these prompts. See you in a minute.
Hi, welcome back. I wanted to do a little more detail about a few of the quilts that I showed and other things in the challenge, which was actually 6 years ago, not just a couple of years ago, and then talk about how I might approach some of these. So this is the hinge for that Unhinged was based on. It's really, I love it. It's just a beautiful hinge. And then here are how I approached the design. So I looked at the shapes in here. So I had straight lines, parallel lines. I've got some circles here and the screw holes actually. And so I've got some really basic shapes here that I can work on, and these are interwoven. So I started out with just using the interwoven strips, and then I started stacking them on top of each other to give more depth. I think if I were to make this design, and I don't plan to, but if I did, I would perhaps make the pieces in the back a darker orange, so it gave it some more depth. But again, it's just the same design. I've taken a basic shape from it, this sort of 3-strip set, and arranged it in an interwoven effect and then stacked them on top of each other. So I'm just playing around with that one shape in the design. And here, just making it longer. I designed these in using Word, if you can believe it, because, you know, that's the first piece of software you think of when you think about designing things. And then what would it look like if I did 3 of them? And we'll talk more about that 3 thing. And then this one is stacked, but without all that white space. So they've been butted up against each other. And I actually kind of like that. Wonder what it would be like if I did different colors. Then this one again is stacked, but it's shifted differently. So I've taken the basic shape, even with the interwoven part. I've tried stacking them, shifting them around, I didn't try different colors because I was trying to kind of stay true to the colors on the hinge. But then I started to add in the screw holes, or the circles that were at the bottom of the hinge. Don't have the screw holes yet. And I thought, well, what if I put them on the side instead of the bottom? So again, I'm just moving things around, taking a basic shape, moving them around, multiplying the numbers to see what happens. Now I've put in the 2 screw holes. I've left out the one in the center. I didn't put in the flathead, whatever, the channel or whatever in there. And then I've combined them all so that I've got the circles at the top and the bottom and the 2 screws. Then I thought, well, all right, let me try that 3-strip set look, do some overlapping, but not following the hinge so much. And then I wanted to add in the circles for a little more interest, gave it some vertical movement there, or diagonal movement. What would I do? How would it look if I put 3 of them together? And while we're here, let's talk about, there are just a few design principles that I'm going to offer you. Rules are made to be broken, but it may help you to at least initially get started in making some decisions. There's something called, there's the rule of thirds and there's the rule of, let's talk about odd. So 3 is always a good number. Odd numbers are more pleasing to the eye, it seems, than even numbers. So if you have a choice between 1, 2, or 3 of something, then consider the 3 rather than the 2. I do 3s a lot, and it often solves a problem for me. It's something to think about. And here I tried with just, oh, nope, this is going into another one. All right, then let's talk about Feynman. Let me give you a Feynman diagram here somewhere. Do I have one? Okay, here's kind of a simple Feynman diagram, so you can see you've got arrows, and this isn't actually, oh, here we go. This is more like a Feynman diagram, so you've got the direction the particles are moving, and et cetera, et cetera. So I just pulled out some of the basic shapes, and this is actually a potential design. So again, I'm just playing around with designs here, pulling out those shapes, alternating the waves and the straight lines, and just stacking them on top of each other. You'll see I've got 3 of each, so I'm doing that 3 thing again. Here's another 3 where I just take one movement and repeat it 3 times. Here I'm doing the waves coming from different particles of different colors. Not quite sure where I was going with that one. I think I rejected it pretty quickly. And here I just stacked a boatload of them. Wouldn't that be fun to piece? I would be doing some applique there, I can tell you. And here's where I started to deconstruct, I guess I would say, the arrows, so that I have the straight lines here for the arrows and then the arrow tips, but I have changed them into more quilt-like shapes, I guess. So I still need the arrows to point, but again, I'm doing 3 of them, and they're kind of like flying geese, kind of. And then I took these straight lines and put them into a wavy pattern so that I was getting both the wave form and also the arrow form. So I've deconstructed it and simplified it. So I don't have the wave form in as a wavy line. I have it in these straight lines moving wave-like. And then there it is with the colors, which, yeah. And let me find, pardon me while I make you dizzy here. Here's another challenge that I did. What did you have for breakfast? And I had a certain toasted oat round cereal. This one, I still want to make this one. I really like that. But I had various permutations. Here they are in a bowl of milk. Here's a renegade one. And that's another thing I like to do, is just pull out one thing that's different. That always makes it kind of fun. And then just with some lines separating it. And you'll notice that I have 5 lines here, not 4. And I have the Cheerios in, oops, I've got some here with just 2, but I'm often putting them in groups of 3. Let me see what else I've got here. We talked about different paths, didn't we? This is knife skills, which is kind of fun. Oh, this is the first one that I did. And I may propose this one, so think about it. But this was, what's the first thing you hear when you wake up in the morning? And for me, it was a train whistle. And it wasn't to do the object that is making the sound, but the sound itself. So this is the train whistle. So it starts out loud, starts to fade out, another one takes up, and then as that one fades out, starts again on a new one. And I ended up changing the gray. So as it faded out, it became a lighter gray. And I did actually buy the fabric, graded fabric, to do that. I just haven't done it yet. All right, different pathways. So I started out just doing straight box-like things to do different pathways. I had just wavy lines, just playing along. This looks like Amtrak, which was not my intent, but sort of arrows moving, people taking different paths. And again, just playing around with some basic shapes to represent it. And then I thought, well, let me throw some curves in there, which would be kind of cool, not necessarily fun to make, but would be kind of cool. And just continued playing with that. And then I ended up with this. I honestly can't tell you where that came from out of that. Straight path and jagged, I don't know. And then I came up with this. So this is an example of how that actually came out of that particular prompt is beyond me. But it did, and I liked it, and I just ran with it. So those are some examples. This is another. No, this is friends. And that's a concept rather than an object. I'm starting this off with objects because I think they're a little easier to tackle when you're first starting to design. So again, I don't know where this was coming from. Isn't that interesting? Friends come and go, we intersect. They go one way, I go another way. And it ended up, I didn't like that one, I'm pretty sure. So it ended up this. So friends are very different. Sometimes our lives intersect, sometimes they don't. And I don't know, it's an interesting design, but again, it didn't, looking at that, you wouldn't say, oh yeah, that's about friends. All right, anything else here I want to show you? This one's kind of interesting. It was about kids. I saw kids playing in the street when it rained really, really hard. And so the storm sewers weren't keeping up and the streets were flooded and there was mud everywhere. So this is rain. And I still like this one. I may still do this one. Let me go full screen with this. And it's just raindrops and then the streaks that you see as the drops are coming down. And again, I'm just taking basic shapes and rearranging them. And here I've got the rain coming straight down with the raindrops that you see periodically. Here they're coming down at an angle. Wind is blowing, obviously, and now I've added some raindrops in. And this is what I finally ended up with. This is the puddle, and then the raindrops and the streaks of rain. And I have actually made this. I didn't show it to you. but I still have work to do. I wasn't happy with the quilting. I mean, I was happy with the quilting that I did, but I want to add some more in, so I didn't show you that one. All right, so that's sort of how I approached some prompts. But I want to review again just a couple of things about, just a couple of design principles that might help you. So one of the design principles that I want to go over is one we've already done, which is odd numbers. And you will see here why I am not a teacher by profession. So 3 is a really good number. That seems to be a good number, but opt for 1, 3, 5, whatever, an odd number rather than even. There's probably a point where it's moot because your eye isn't distinguishing how many are there. It's just a bunch. The second one that I use a lot is the rule of thirds. Again, rules are made to be broken, but this is especially nice for those of us who aren't inclined to be symmetrical all the time. So in that, you take your canvas or your quilt or whatever surface, and you divide it into thirds, both directions. So it doesn't matter if it's square or rectangle, you divide it into thirds. And then you place the pieces that you want to emphasize either at these intersecting points, not all of them, but whichever you choose, or on one of these lines. So you might end up with something that, and I do this a lot on quilts, where I have a strip of something and I line it up off center, and I almost always do it toward the left. I don't know why. And if I'm going to place a piece, then I will say I'm putting another piece in. I might put one there and I might put one there. I do circles and bars a lot. So, and that is, if you're uncertain about how to place something or it looks off somehow, then try placing it according to the rule of thirds. So just divide it up into thirds and then place the items that you want to emphasize on those points or those lines. All right, then the other one is just balance, and this one's a hard one to describe. It's, your eye is going to know it if it looks balanced or not. Balance doesn't mean symmetrical necessarily. It just means that your eye isn't troubled and looking for more somehow. Most of the time when I think about balance for myself, I think about putting the heavier objects toward the bottom. So if I've got something like going off into space, then they're going to be smaller as they go up. And I want the weight down here so that my eye just seems happier with that. The balance is really hard for me to describe. Probably a professional artist could do it better. But I think you know when you look at something and that just doesn't look balanced, like there's way too much going on over here and there's nothing over here, or there's a lot here and very little there, and they don't connect somehow. They don't work with each other. So it's a balancing act, I guess is what I'm trying to say. These 3 things I think will help you when you're actually laying things out. But let's talk about finding the things to lay out. The basic steps that I usually take when I am designing a quilt, especially based on an object prompt, which is what we're going to start with. The first thing that I do is to deconstruct it, to give me some basic shapes. So for unhinged, for example, I came up with actually 2 basic shapes. We had the 3 strip set, and we also had the circle. So there was a ring and there was also one that was filled in. So I took those 3 shapes and just started playing with them. I separated them from each other and treated them as separate objects, no longer that cohesive hinge that I started out with. Next, I look to see if I can or want to simplify the shapes, which we saw in the Feynman diagram, where I had wavy lines, or the Feynman diagram had wavy lines, and I decided to simplify that into straight lines moving in a wave fashion. And then the arrows, I actually simplified down to just the triangles. Trying to think of what else I had that I showed you. That's probably the best example of simplifying it. But remember, this does not have to look like the prompt in the end. It doesn't have to look like the object in the end. You don't have to use all of the shapes. You could just take one that's interesting, 1 or 2 that are interesting, and play with those. And then I'm going to look at rearranging and that's the most fun for me. You've got these shapes now, you can play around with them. The breakfast cereal example, for example, where I had them first in a bowl of cereal and then I had them in the boxes in different sizes and colors of boxes. With the unhinged, again, I started rearranging the pieces. Some of them I left just as they were, where they sort of were interwoven. And sometimes I just moved them all around and they weren't in that shape at all. So in one case I had it, let me see if I can draw this so you can see what I'm saying, where I had it like that and then I put circles here. So just play around with rearranging them. That's the fun part, I think. Remembering gleefully that it doesn't have to look anything like the original. You can also, of course, resize. So take any of those shapes and just change the size. If you start out with a shape that's like this, you can make it larger. I'm not going to fill all that in. You could keep both sizes. You could have 3 different sizes, which would probably be my preference, because I like to do those 3s. So just resize some of them, make some of them larger, some of them smaller, keep some the original size, play around with that. And then I also, you noticed in the unhinged, I stacked those things. You can also overlap them, of course. That helps to connect things and bring them together. So here are 5 things that you can try as you are starting to design this. Now, if these don't appeal to you, if you want to approach it differently, absolutely do that. This is a place for you to start if you're uncertain about where to start. Now, I am going to do a sample prompt. This is not the prompt for the week because I don't want to do the prompts ahead of time. I want you to go off on your own path and not be subconsciously doing what I do with a prompt. So this is just, you can absolutely do this if you want, but I want to start with a prompt which is childhood toys and games. When I'm thinking about childhood toys and games, I am in my 60s, so they are quite different from, some of them are quite different from what kids may be doing today, but I'm going to review my childhood. And we did a lot of board games, which of course you're not going to recreate those board games. You want to respect the rights of the people who designed them to begin with, but as a starting point. There, let's see, I used to like to play jacks a lot. We did hopscotch. Of course, you've got all of the ball games, basketball, baseball, kickball, tetherball, whatever. I was not a very sportsy person, so those don't come to mind as much for me as some of the others do. I used to roller skate a lot. Skateboards came out when I was young. I used to skateboard pretty well for the day. It's nothing like the skateboarding now, but I am going to go with, I think, roller skates. Now, the roller skates that I used most often were the ones that just clamped onto your shoes, and you wanted to have pretty sturdy shoes. Otherwise, they hurt a lot. But I'm going to go with what we wore when we went to the skating rink, which were the shoe style roller skates. So first thing I'm going to do is think about the shape. So this is going to be badly drawn, but you've got the shoe and you've got the laces and you've got the little stopper thing on the front. And of course you've got the wheels. So I have some options here. It doesn't look like a very comfortable skate to skate in, does it? I don't think that's where the stopper actually was. It's been a long time. So if I deconstruct this and look at the shapes, I've got, of course, the wheel shape. And I've got the shoe shape, which I could maybe do something with. It's not crying out to me at the moment. I've got this sort of base shape there, so I've got just a bar kind of shape. Now, I will warn you, one of my favorite design things is circles and bars. So we'll see if I come up with that this time. And then again, we have circles up here, rings more up here. And then we have the laces. Now, so we've got these particular shapes. We deconstructed it. And now, is there anything that I want to simplify? The only thing really I think I have here to simplify is this shoe shape. And of course I could simplify it in terms of making it that shape. I could put in, there was a little bit of a rounding there, I think, so I could put a triangle in there to make it a little different shape. I could, of course, break that down even further into these shapes, but, you know, that's a possibility as well. The wheels actually have a center portion too, right? Yes, there's the rubber on the outside and then the sort of base of it. All right, so now I can rearrange the shapes. I didn't have much to simplify. I was pretty happy with what I had, basically. So I can choose a shape or two and start rearranging. Or take all the shapes. I think all the shapes is going to just be overkill for what I want to do. I want to do something that's fairly minimalist so I don't have a lot going on the quilt. And I'm thinking about this for my front hallway, so it's not going to be particularly large. All right, let's start with the wheels here. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of do thumbnails. These are a little larger than thumbnails, but for you to be able to see, just do something maybe in the shape you want the quilt to be. Maybe you want it to be square, maybe you want it to be very long. If you have a preference, then do that. Now as I'm rearranging, I'm going to be thinking about the rule of thirds and having odd numbers. So I'm going to start out with the wheels here, and I'm going to put one here, and it's not very 30 though, is it? A little higher I want it. And maybe another one here, and one up here, and that sort of echoes the shape of the shoe if I want to do that. The boot, excuse me, not the shoe. That's pretty I do have this center in there, which I could do. And always keep in mind, if you want to do different colors, you certainly can do that. I can resize, of course, and stack. If I were to resize, would I want to do something like that? Then I've got the overlap and the stack thing, which it's kind of hard to divorce those because they will make for a little better design. Now, of course, I don't have to stay within the bounds, so I could do part of a circle here, and I could have those overlap. And maybe this overlap is a different color than these two. Maybe these are all different colors or different shades or tints of the same color. I am always looking for how a viewer might see these and what they might see in them. So this is kind of like, this particular one I think is a bit too much like when you don't want to, when you're designing clothing or shirts, you don't want to put, you know, 2 fried eggs in an inappropriate position. So rather than, and maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want a representation of a breast in there, but that's not what I'm going for here. So I might do this and then add in, stack another, oh, now it's going to look like an eye. See, this is the kind of stuff you do when you're designing. What am I going to, I actually kind of like that. It looks a little cartoony, doesn't it? With the eyes. Might be creepy to some. I kind of like it. Now, the other thing that I've kind of started to do here is, if you're looking at the roller skate at even a little bit of an angle, then you'll see the back wheels, so they're overlapping, and I've kind of started to do that, but I could do just like the same size sort of coming around there. So lots of things you can do with stacking and rearranging with that. I could also combine a couple of shapes. So say I want to use this kind of platformy thing, or the sole, I guess, of the boot. Then again, I'm going to put something up here, and I can feel myself falling into the bars and circles trap that is my brain. So these are at the thirds, and I'll have some thirds going this way. So I could just do some bars, just use that particular design, that shape, and then I could kind of stack and resize at the same time and put that behind that. Again, doing different colors. Now I've got 3 shapes down here, basically. Now, I don't always follow the rule of thirds or the odd numbers, but it's a place for me to start, or if something looks a little weird. Now, this has got pretty good weight down here. This is a little lighter. I think I want, do I want to do another bar up here? If I do, I don't think I want it to be here because it lines up with that, and I don't want this to be symmetrical. I'm not a symmetrical person. If you are, then go with that. Different people's brains are wired differently. My quilting friend Nancy is hardwired for symmetrical, and go with that. There's nothing wrong with symmetrical. So if I want to do another bar shape, these are all running off the edge of the quilt. I'm going to do one that isn't. And then I have opportunities here where these could be different colors when they overlap. And of course I can always add a circle in. And have that overlap. That looks like too much to me. What do you think? I think that's really too much. And if I add one circle in, then I feel like I need to add at least one in again for balance. Unless I'm trying to, I might do something, sorry, I'm getting off on tangents here, but if I have a lot of these, we saw this with the Rogue cereal piece, where I have all of those, and then I might introduce one that's a little wavy, just because I have a Rogue in there. So Rogue is something that I like to do in designs. Really straight lines, and then some Rogues in there. So I might do something like that here. I could add in a wavy line. There is no wavy line on a skate, not very wavy anyway, but I could absolutely add one in, because we aren't saying that we have to hold to those parameters. So what if we did that? If we did, say, something like this, you can, when you're doing thumbnails, do anything you want, of course, but you can use them to do just completely separate designs, find one that you like, and then do a larger design that's a little more precise in what you want to do, or you can use them to continue to explore a design that you like. So maybe instead of that bar, got 3 of those, you might do a wavy line there. If I do one, do I want to do more? I think I might. Do I want to do one here? And then another one going off there? Maybe. So that's my Rogue piece. But I really want to try to do something with this whole lacing thing. So I could do a lace just straight up like you would see on lacing, or close to it. Let's start with 3, and I would drop them down if I'm only doing those 3, just so it looks grounded. But then you have this kind of thing going on, and crosses, and I think I would want to simplify that. So grab another sheet of paper here. And instead, I think I will do just something very simple. So if I simplify it down to its basic, it's, again, a bar and a circle. What can I say? So I could do this for the lace, the boot lace, and then this for the eye hole, lace hole. And I could, of course, put on the other one, have it run off the page, and then, or off the quilt, I guess, and then put another here. That one looks a little like handcuffs to me. And to be clear, I have never worn handcuffs. I've never been arrested, never worn handcuffs. And then another one there, so I've got 3. This looks like kind of a door hinge to me. Funny how I'd come up with another hinge, huh? All right, so that is the worst thumbnail shape I've ever seen. I think I want to try just this and then a circle on top of it. It's not quite at a third, but I'm going to drop down here and then do another one here. And I want to do a third one. These aren't necessarily placed where I would put them. And this one's going to be smaller. So I'm resizing, I'm kind of rearranging things. All right, what if I do something like this? And then another piece here. Let's make this one larger. And then maybe another one here with a much shorter lace. Now that looks like sunglasses. These are all possibilities for names of quilts. Don't laugh too hard. I want this to be minimalist. So this is what happens if I overlap these a bit. So this comes in here with the smaller. So those two are connected, and then this one sort of floats up here a little more. I need to work on the resizing and precisely how I want to arrange these, but this is roughly at the third. That isn't, but I might actually, do I want to have them grouped together or do I want to have it further up? I won't belabor this forever. Just kind of showing you what I go through. It's a lot of fun for me. I like doing this. Designing quilts is my very favorite part of making quilts. Okay. That, of course, doesn't even have to be running through the center there. It can be dropped down a little bit. And then what if this is, you know, up at the other third and sort of floating off into space? Yeah, I think this one is my favorite one so far. So I would probably pursue that further and start to be more precise in what I'm doing, so that my sizes, the size relationships, proportions will be closer to what I want to do on the quilt. You know, maybe I even, let me do another thumbnail here. I said I wasn't going to belabor this forever, didn't I? What if I just did a lace all the way across and then had this here? I could even do, of course, now I'm getting into just the bars and circles thing that I do. So that's an option. I still think I'm heading for something like that. So now I've got this concept down and I can start thinking about, do I want these to be all one color? So very minimalist. Do I want them, all three of them, to be different colors? Do I want the circles to be a different color than the laces? And what exactly are those proportions going to be? Now, I'm not plotting out the quilt. I'm not ready to do the design and start figuring out, all right, this is 6 inches long and the circle is 4 inches in diameter, whatever. I'm not ready to do that yet. And you don't have to do that unless you decide you want to make the quilt. For the purposes of this design challenge, getting to this point is certainly plenty. You can take it further if you like, but of course, if you don't want to take it that far, it's okay too. This is a free-for-all design challenge. But try and find a design that you at least think is something that you could sit and think about, maybe set it aside for a little while and come back to it. And make as many thumbnails as you need to. Start to refine it more if you want to. So I think that on the final quilt, I actually want this to be pretty good size down here. So I'm grounding it, I guess. And it looks like I'm going to end up without having anything going over the edge, and that's okay. I often like to have things go off the edge of the quilt, but it isn't necessary. And then I want this to not quite touch that. I think I may have to do another one of these, but this is smaller. And I could have, say, this side larger and this circle smaller on that side. And then I think I want this to be pretty small, so that I almost nest those three. And these all appear in the lower third, which is okay. And that one's closer to center. I might actually move that over because I want this to be fairly asymmetrical. I just want these all to kind of be in opposition to each other. So I would continue to play with that sizing and arrangement to see what I really liked, but I kind of like that. It is very minimalist, and you could certainly go with something that's more symmetrical. And will end up looking like more like roller skate laces. You could do smaller ones to begin with, make them a little larger and further spread out. Kind of liking this idea too. More like that, and then they could start to come back in again. You could make them farther apart as you go up. Let's see if I can do this a little smaller. So we'll make these closer together here, but as you move further up, they're lifting away, flying away, so they'll be further apart. So that's another thing, I guess, about resizing is you can graduate or gradate them inside. I actually like some of those too. This looks like the front of a band uniform with the buttons and the braid. Anyway, I said I wasn't going to belabor that. That's pretty much how I go about designing a quilt, and this is based on our demo prompt of childhood toys and games and the boot skate. So that brings us to your challenge for the week, and I will demonstrate that, how I'm going to design that, and I'm not going to do it ahead of time. But I will demonstrate that next week after you've all had a chance to do your own designs. And the challenge is going to be a musical instrument. It might be one you play, one you've always wanted to play, one that you think has an interesting shape, one that's your favorite sound, whatever, or one that is particular to your culture or history. So just choose a musical instrument. And again, you can go through this whole process of deconstructing, simplifying, rearranging, and resizing. And the stack and overlap, I guess I would really put in to rearrange. So that's our plan for next Sunday, will be to do musical instrument. Have fun doing that. I hope you enjoy doing this. Share it on Instagram or and tag me on Instagram, or share it with me on Facebook if you're on either of those platforms. And I'd love to see what you all are doing. And we'll all be interested to see what I do with it next week. I will see you then on Wednesday. I think I'm going to do another 2.5-inch square thing. We'll see. But in the meantime, be well, be happy, be quilting. Peace out.